Welcome, everyone, to this week's service of the Holy Church of Joe Biden. Is the week of 6/8/2021 at 12:14 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'd like to get an early start on this week in order to secure a on-time service. I'd like to invite you all in joining me this week with our beginning of a common prayer. Um, by now, you should know how this goes. I say a prayer, end it with a hymn. I hope you all join me on a hymn. Let's begin. Once in Joe Biden's life, he has probably said the words no and pickle ahem.
Ahem.
Um,
Once in Joe Biden's life, sorry, Dash, for the second you caught me off guard with that. He has probably said the words Russia and science ahem.
Ahem.
Once in Joe Biden's life, he has probably said the words Walmart in South Carolina ahem.
Ahem.
Um, I'd like to continue the tradition of the weekly readings from the Bidecon before we go into our next segment here, a new edition, which I hope you are all excited for. Um, but this week I'll be reading from the Book of Joe Biden. This is the one and only story um, written by Joe Biden himself and recovered long ago by fellow members of Bidenism in the I believe it was the Golden Triangle in Turkey, if I'm not wrong, Charles the First.
The Golden
Um,
Square, actually, but
my apologies. I'm thinking of
yeah.
the Golden Triangle in
But over
Antarctica.
time,
I'm so
it's kind
sorry.
of become a golden triangle because the edges have been cut off by Google Maps as the years have gone by.
It's really sad that
Yeah, it
our
really
holy
is.
lands are being
The
diminished.
Google is
Free Golden
trying to
Triangle.
silence us.
Oh, sorry, free Golden Square. Man,
Yeah,
their
hashtag
impact
free
has
the Golden
left me
Square, man.
impacted on multiple
Or the
levels.
Yellow Square. It's called the Yellow Square. That's right.
The yellow. Sorry, home, dude.
We
Google Maps is really
Google
ruining
Maps,
my.
man. Google Maps. I mean, it's still on there, but like, they
Eh,
if you scroll out, it's not a square anymore.
it's not a square.
It's okay.
Anyways, continuing with the new evil from the Book of Joe Biden, written by him himself, originally found in the Yellow Square in Turkey, the Holy Land. Long, long ago, Joe Biden was sitting in his house. He thought to himself, I am a great vice president. And with these words, he set out to create a better government, striving for the greatness of all Bidenists. Through all he suffered forward, and upon reaching a mighty Russia with a single motion, he cut a path straight through, allowing his followers to pass and escape the capitalist ideals. But alas, a new foe would arise, one greater and more powerful than all others, Donald Trump. Through arid plain and vast wilderness, he led his followers, until the time had come to confront the enemy. On the grand steps of Constantino, Washington, D.C., a mighty battle was fought between the two, but all was for naught. This new foe was too powerful for our Savior, and so he said to his followers, we must rekindle the fire of idealism in our society. And with these final words, he was struck down, out of office, and retired, living out the rest of his happy life. Praise Biden. Oof, every time I read that, shivers go down my spine. And I really hope you all feel the same impact from the words of Joe Biden as I do. And I know personally Charles I had similar um, responses
Yes.
and a
This
connection unlike
story
any other.
is very old as well, and Joe Biden, since then, of course, has left his retirement. And has recovered from that battle against Donald Trump in 2016. So maybe
And we
one
are
day we
grateful.
will receive more words from Joe Biden since
One
then.
day. We
One
can only hope.
day, we all hope.
Until that day, we are left here, Tuesday service, 12:18 a.m. Eastern Time. And I want to introduce a new segment. Last week's, public confessionals, it was definitely an idea. It was definitely an experiment project. Um, one to learn from for sure. Um, Definitely wasn't as good as the guided meditation the week before. But this one, I think, this one could definitely be one um, that can continue on for a long time and hopefully bring a lot of interest to Joe Biden and the whole issue of Joe Biden himself. And I think we need to begin to discuss more. One thing with activity in the whole issue of Joe Biden is that, you know, it's all in a issue to issue activity, if that makes sense. When an issue arises, conversation happens, and while I think that's, great that we're problem solving, developing, learning, and progressing, I think, there needs to be more time for reflection, innovation, more of an in-depth understanding of the whole issue of Joe Biden and its either political workings or the life that we lead outside of it. And I think one great way of doing that is by hosting, kind of a forum-esque weekly podcast, monthly podcast, maybe. Um, for these services. I think it could be a great idea to get, the community members involved in speaking out about what they think and what they plan, like, ideas they want brought to light. And, I think this could be a great way for grassroots campaigns in the Deutsche Joe Biden and just general banter amongst us Bidenists because, we're in a Discord, where we are at a time in our lives unlike any other. COVID-19, while, it's on the ropes at the moment, I really think it's about time we begin to talk and grow as a community, let alone a church. Um, and, I thought we could have Joe talks about Joe and maybe our experiences with him. I feel like there are very personal segments of divine intervention and visions that never see the light of day, um, due to how personal they are. But I think that spreading the word of um, these holy reaches into our mortal lives could really expand just the not whimsy but the overall the magnitude of this church that we have, and the presence of Joe in our lives. And I think if people understand, the importance of it all, then maybe, word will cross, and people will understand and they will see because I love this place. It's our home, it's our community. And, I just want it to grow. Um, where the podcast be published, I certainly think my original
At
idea.
this
Thank you,
time,
Desiree.
I don't think it's 100% clear.
Yeah, we're thinking of either integrating it into the surface and having it be like, say we do like
But I
a
think he's asking like where it will be posted
yeah, 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 yeah,
afterwards.
but I'm saying like
Okay.
if we did integrate it into being the into the service, then it would be put on YouTube, and we could also begin posting services and other things onto other platforms if we needed that outlet. But at the moment, YouTube at least. Um, and I'm not sure about Spotify. I don't know how that works. SoundCloud would definitely work. That would be pretty
Spotify
easy to
we
do.
could do, but that would require
Um,
us going through a middleman,
Very
and
true.
that would cost us some money. Like we could do it through
Funny.
now the SoundCloud's another option, but that has like a upload limit. So we might have to
Hmm.
delete old episodes. I don't know. We'll figure it out.
But yeah, it's definitely something we need to think about. And the logistics, it's kind of a more recent idea. But I don't know. I just thought it may be a good idea to help connect community. And I believe we have a few topics to talk about today. If that's for Jackson second, if you'd like to join us in discussion, um, mainly about divine interventions that we've had with Joe Biden, um, and possibly if you have any, burning ideas or questions about the current political sphere,
Yes, I am
as
actually quite
well.
interested to hear people's opinions on the People's Council, which is, as you know, Big Biden Barty's main plan.
Yes. In the server desk. Yep. No problem. Um, but I did want to begin by like I said, the divine interventions. And mainly one I've had recently. Normally as the Pope of Bidenism, I never thought of just the pure magnitude of the connection and the proximity that you have with this almost divine barrier of Joe Biden and his outreach and his influence. But from my rising of ranks in this church, Charles the First, I would say it was very much like a Joe Biden, almost like similar to Christianity, right? Where you read the Bible, you hear of all these great deeds that God and Jesus and whoever else in the Bible has done these things, right? Um, and I always thought, oh, I'm just a member of Bidenism, I'm just along for the ride. I'm just here to see what happens. And I quickly became a premier of the Bishop Circle. Um, Took a little bit of a break, and then when I came back and ran for Archbishop, I began to felt that buzz, that residual static of almost like a weakened barrier in between the material and divine planes, if you could say. What do you share a similar experience, Charles the First?
Yes, I like to think of when you join the Holy Church of Joe Biden that you are like a seed, a seedling, and then over
Mm,
time your spirit is cultivated and you grow, your plant grows, and you begin to learn more about Joe Biden and the things that he has done. And then you begin to, well, see him in your day to day life. That's just how it is.
it's a beautiful way to put it. It truly
Yeah.
is. Um, but as I became um, this 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 figure of power among the church and this almost symbol of divinity, it that crackling barrier almost began to fade, and I could feel like I could just reach out and just put my face into the light of Joe Biden, and it was so much easier to contact and hear and understand, and it was clearer to me. And that barrier broke the other day, I would say. Um, about a week ago, a few nights before graduation, I was laying in my bed, and that it was almost like when you get the when like the hair stands up on your arms, but everywhere. It was almost like a massive balloon was just rubbed along my bed, and everything was statically charged. It was just a tingling sensation everywhere, in this warmth, this unfamiliar yet soothing warmth was just blanketed over me. Not my comforter, not my bed sheets. It was something more. And as I closed my eyes, just trying to think and reach in and understand what was happening, the darkness faded. It was almost like a guided meditation that I brought you guys through 2 weeks ago before that event. Instead of me guiding you, it was almost like something else was guiding me. And as the light began to glow and illuminate and fill my sphere of vision, words drifted out. First, incomprehensible, Charles. It was scary. It really was. But comforting still. It was a weird mix of shock and I couldn't understand it. But that's when it hit me. Have you heard anything like this, Charles? Jackson? Anyone? Like
Well,
it
it
was
sounds to me like the gods themselves tried to speak to you. Uh, and that's a hard situation to deal with sometimes. Only experienced diviners can really truly understand it and get the words out and write them down. That's how we
yeah.
receive stories into the Vitacon, actually.
But I think this event, from what I could feel, from what I could gather I would say I was speechless, but speech wasn't available at all. It was more so, I don't know.
Well,
It was
sometimes
crazy.
Biden is just without words. It's
Yes.
you can't describe it.
No. And it felt like a tether, like from the light, shining down upon me. I could feel in my heart, my chest, and my soul, just like a connection plugged in. And I'm excited to see where this leads and what comes from it. But I feel that this is really a good idea, or sorry, a good reason, not a good idea, to create a good idea of a Bitacon, um, what's the word? A Bitacon writing movement, where we try and get these divine connections to flow. I feel like right now, out of all the times I've ever been in this church, is the best time to reach out. I feel like there is almost uh, please understand, I'm not trying to speak for the gods, but trying to interpret what they mean. But I feel like there is a hunger, a borderline yearning for a connection. It's been a while. I mean, since the roller coaster story came along, through you, thankfully, Charles I, there hasn't been much divine connection in the church. And I think this is them trying to reach out and say, hey, we're here, talk to us, you know? And I wanted to, as part of this semi podcast that we're having at the moment, extend that offer to everyone else in the church to reach out, see what you get and see how favored you are. Or not favored you are, but how lucky you could be in getting one of these connections, and see if we can, get an initiative going to hopefully get more um Bitacon entries, because I think they want to give, and I just think we need to be willing to receive. What do you think about that, Charles? First.
I agree wholeheartedly. I believe that we should try to reach out and start divining again. Like back in the day, we used to have tons of diviners who would
Exactly.
write down the word and put it in the
Mhm.
Vitacon. But ever since really the when Pope Garrett the First took control, we we just haven't heard as much. There's just been silence.
It's truly sad, and I'm hoping that this is a good change in the course of the church, reconnecting with the divine side of things. I feel like there was almost a divine gate between us and them, and I'm glad to see that they're fighting through, and they're making their way back into our lives even more prevalent than before. Um, I'm hoping our prayers soon become communication, instead of yearning for wants their needs, for talking with them and understanding and gleaning what we can from them and their omniscience. Um, but that's about all I have to say. Crazy experience, man. Like when you go to bed, you expect, some sheep, maybe if you're into ASMR, that type of thing. I mean, but darkness, but it was a pleasant surprise for sure. And I wish it upon anyone else that reaches out. Joseph, do you have any experiences like that you can recall from memory? I know you're one of the great diviners of your time. Um, do you have any events or stories that stuck out to you? Joseph, do you muted you?
Sorry, I was coughing.
Oh, I understand.
Well, it's been so long. I mean, recently, as you know, Wilbur Soot came to me in a vision and told me about the story of the roller coaster. But that was really the most recent thing.
Mm, I understand. Just a second, I realized you began. You unmuted your mic. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, when because I was Pope before you.
Hmm.
For anyone that doesn't know, and several times I did have feelings. I guess would not strictly visions, but enlightenment that did feel um, sort of like epiphanies that it's felt like I was being communicated with by um, some kind of God within our church. It's hard to say which specifically, because I think they all have wisdom that they can share with us, all different types of wisdom. Um, but I definitely have encounters where I made decisions and moved the church in ways that felt guided, not by my hand, but by another, if that makes any sense.
No, that was beautiful. I think the point of um, all gods having what their own offerings is really important to understand. Beautiful. Sorry, that's ginger ale. Yeah, I mean, it's really crazy. And I will be updating you guys more on how the BedCon initiative is going. And hopefully getting, a lot more diviners. Maybe a divine revolution would be a good way to send off this papal, um, what do you call it? Period. I can't think of the word. Term. There we go. Papal term. Um, but Charles, I know you wanted to ask people's opinions on the People's Council. Was it?
Yes. So, as many of you know, the Big Biden Party, or the um, Triple B, if you will, has since their founding has advocated for sort of like, if you remember, the reforms to the bishop circle, when they would
Mm,
attempt to kind of reforming the council, or even getting rid of the council in that regard, and making it a kind of Switzerland-esque direct democracy. And that we haven't really had any form of debating it really in the church yet. Like, I know we were probably going to discuss it in the papal debates, which are upcoming. I think we're going to do them either next week, or the first one next week, or the week after that. But I feel like this would be a good opportunity to kind of get some starting ideas out there before we start getting into the real meat of the electoral process. So, does anyone have anything they would like to say about the People's Council? And then maybe someone like to debate their opinion, or maybe give their own opinion? I don't know. Let's see.
Um, I don't know how well you can hear me, but
You're pretty clear,
basically,
Dasibar. Don't worry. Okay.
okay. Um, Personally, I am a member of the Big Biden Party, but I'm not the hugest fan of the People's Council. Like, I've had some time to think over it, but I don't really think that it's the best idea. Like, it's basically a version of the council, except it's a mini version, which I think is a little unneeded, if that's the right word.
hmm.
I mean, that's pretty much my opinion about it.
No, I could agree with that. I think saying I think my main gripe with it is I believe that more opinions is a good idea. I just think more opinions should be spread in general and maybe not directly input into the law, if that makes sense. So we've all been in this church for some time. We've all been able to see the trends of the parties and their popularity and how it affects polling in elections, even. And I think we saw it very clearly in this last one. You know, the party with the greater number wins. And while I think that can be used for good, opposed to the American um, like government that we have in place today, where we have two party system that are generally equal. In the Holy Church of Joe Biden, we have many parties that are scattered in varying sizes. And I think it's unfair to the smaller parties to be put into this bigger pool um, of contestants essentially for their ideas if it can be easily swayed by a non-regulated influx of people that we've seen in the past. Um, that's the main reason I don't support the People's Council, is mainly how um, with voter registration and how difficult it is to perfect and ensure fair elections opposed to equal elections. I think there's a difference there. And I don't think the People's Council addresses that yet. I think if they're able to do it or propose it in a way that ensures completely fair voting, um, I could possibly get behind it, but I'd have to see what they come up with it in the Big Biden party. Um, that's really my take on it. I don't know, but I do like to hear a Big Biden party's perspective, even if they don't agree with their party's main objective directly. Good to hear.
This is a little, I guess, unrelated, but you just gave me an idea. What if so you said how it's not exactly fair for small parties to fight against big parties. So what
Mhm.
if the smaller parties were to just fight against, well, smaller parties, while the bigger parties were to fight against, well, bigger parties? I'm not sure how well that would work, but I want to hear your opinion on it.
Um, the first thing I think of when you say have the smaller parties fight smallers and biggers fight biggers is possibly dividing the parties into specific almost spheres of the politics, if that makes sense. So if we had um what's a big example that I can think of? Say we had bigger overarching parties, right? And then maybe we divided it into subgroups. This is getting very complex at this point, and I think a little overcomplicated. But just for the sake of it, maybe each political party had like subgroups that dealt with special issues. Maybe issue parties
A
conglomerating
caucus,
into
perhaps.
larger. A caucus would be a great way to describe that. Um, and I think maybe that would work. Um, I think on the other hand, though, I believe keeping the politics simpler, especially for newer members, is much easier to deal with. And I also think the system's worked for long enough, um, and I haven't really seen a lot of dissatisfaction in my time. Um, I'm sure Charles, you've seen plenty in yours. But
Oh
I don't know.
yes, we've had many different ideas for how to distribute um, well offices and also how elections work. Like we could do
Mm,
like a proportional system. For instance, like instead of singularly voting for an office, you would have just one vote and you'd vote for that party, and then how many votes that party receives, they would be distributed the seats proportionally. But that didn't really make sense for us at the time because we have, of course, a much smaller parliament compared to the other things. Like we only have 7 seats, and at the time we only had 5. So like
mhm.
it just wouldn't actually correlate to any real change. It would still be a two-party system. Something
Yeah.
we have tried to do. I mean, this theoretically would have fixed it. Well, you could have like a ranked choice voting. We were gonna do that at one point in time, but that just was too difficult to set up for us because we like to get the results out as quick as possible, and that would just take us
Mhm.
so long to tabulate. But I mean, we could try to put in place a ranked choice. Another thing is, there's really only 2 parties truly in the church because they're only the New Progressive Conservative and Big Biden Party actually run candidates for most of the seats. I mean, in this most recent election, the only other one really was the New Progressive Party, and they only ran 2 candidates, didn't they?
Yeah, I believe so.
So there really isn't there are a bunch of parties, but they aren't necessarily like actual influencing parties. They don't really stand for winning seats. They really stand more for influencing the public consciousness, not necessarily actually winning seats. Like, for instance,
Mhm.
in the past, we had like the Templar Party, which I mean was a major party at some extent, but really their main goal was to influence the Pope into like creating Ricardo as a god and just being more open to the people. Or you had like the Deaf to Traitors Party, which was less of a political party and more of just a group that tried to support the ideas of Garantonism and authoritarian policy in the Holy Church of Joe Biden. So, like, I don't really think that a proportional or ranked choice thing is needed. But if we do at some point in time have more members and we have more established minor parties, then maybe. But that's just my take on it.
Well said.
Now,
Uh,
okay, sorry, Jessica, go ahead.
it's okay, but so I have an idea. Maybe we should release like a poll where we ask for people's opinions. Like how, for example, one of the questions would be, what's your opinion on the People's Council? Like that's just an example. And then people would have to write their opinion on it, for example. How
Mhm.
well would that work?
So you're like saying have it be open response rather than yes and no?
Yeah.
I mean, we have a pretty apathetic voter base. I don't know if they would spend the time to write out their opinion, but maybe. I think it would be better just to like to have public forums like these and just to ask people their opinions rather than doing a poll. And you know, people don't always like being added all the time, so that's why we try to keep them at a minimum. But you know, I'll add an open response question next poll this Friday for you, Dosifier, and we'll see if we get anyone to say anything.
All right.
Jackson II, did you have anything to say about the People's Council?
I like the idea of it. I do, because I think it allows it. Assuming it works smoothly, it would be, you know, a direct democracy, which is sort of what it would be. Would allow everyone to get their opinion in, and everyone would have an equal opinion. But I do think the problem is that it would, because of the way that this works, that most of our communications through Discord, it would be hard because you would either have to set a very low minimum number of required voters,
Yeah.
or nothing would get done.
Logistically, the idea, as I understand it, does not make any sense for the whole.
Yeah, the logistics would be hard, and if you were to, let's say, like, make it so only like, let's say 15
like,
people had
yeah.
to vote for something to be passed, then you could just have 15 people. Then you would basically allow you to rig a
It
vote
also
very.
kind of defeats the purpose, like if you have like
Yeah.
a vote be out there, and because like the idea of the council is they're meeting and discussing it. But if you have a huge people's council and they're voting on something and you do like a public referendum for it, they'll never get the chance to discuss it because they're never all going to be online at the same time to have a meeting. And even if you do require them to pass things through a meeting, that meetings are never going to happen because there's so many conflicting time zones and conflicting
Yeah.
schedules. It will just never happen. And I like to pull up an example. Like, we have tried something like this before with the Bishop Circle, which, if you don't know, the Bishop Circle is just anyone who has a bishop title, so that was basically everyone at the time. So we tried to reform the Bishop Circle to be a kind of, like, we still kept the council, but we had it as a lower house, sort of like the House of Representatives in the American political system. And it was gonna, we didn't give it a ton of power, but we were like saying, you guys can write statutes and send it to the council or whatever. And they never met, they met a single time. And that single time, I think they appointed Veda the premier. And that was literally the only time they ever met. And they didn't do anything. Like, they had this ability, but they couldn't use it because it was so hard to coordinate. Another thing is, it was unclear how, like, once again, how many people would have to be in attendance to hold a meeting. Like, half the church? Well, half the church is never online. So it would be, it's just too hard to coordinate. That's why we've always had a representative system.
Actually, a really good point with meetings and Just how the logistics of it all actually does make a lot of sense. But
And that would only get harder as the church expands. And
Exactly.
I think our main goal
yeah,
right now
Yeah.
is expanding.
it's
Yeah.
very true.
See, I've been in our government for a very long time, and we've tried a lot of these things, and our current system has been developed over many years to work. And I don't think uprooting it and just changing everything that each thing stands for and their powers will really serve to benefit anyone. If anything,
Mhm.
I think it would debase our systems and destabilize the church. Like an example would be when Pope Garrett took control of the church um, in his coup d'état against me in 2017. This is not really an example, but it kind of is an example. He abolished the council and instituted the Council of 12, which was a 12-member council. Where am I going with this? What was I talking about? I've already forgotten. But it didn't work very well, and he kind of controlled it. So, oh yeah, so in a people's council, it's going to be a rule of who has the loudest voice, because like theoretically, it, everyone can speak, but it's still a majority rule system regardless. So like, for instance, we have a strong man in the people's council who's saying, I want to take over and have all the control. He can bully people basically to have an always 50% and always get his stuff done.
Yeah, and I think that's a really bad thing to have in the church. I think currently how we have it is pretty good, and pretty fair, I'd say. Um, so hopefully we won't need to change, but I think there could be a way that the People's Council could be created, and I'll leave that up to the Big Biden Bar to figure out, but that could work. Um, I just don't see it being a realistic option at the moment. Yet due to the logistics of everything. But good points, very good points. I don't
All
want to
right.
keep you guys too long. If there are any burning topics you guys want to speak about before we close off, please do tell. But for the first episode, it ain't too bad.
Uh, I'd like to say one more thing.
Mhm.
What if we were to try and expand the Holy Church of Biden to like other social media in order to like get the word out there? That's the right way to phrase it.
Well, we do have other social media accounts. They just don't really have as much of a follower base as the main Discord server. Like we have well, the Pope has a Twitter.
Mhm.
There's also I think an Instagram account, but it hasn't been used in a long time, and I don't know the password. Do you know the password, Veda?
I think you sent it to me. I could probably find
Okay.
it.
We also have an Amino, I think, but that's not really used by anyone. I mean, there's a bunch of people in it, but they just use it to discuss Joe Biden, not the Holy Church of Joe Biden. We could certainly try, but once again, that would require a lot of organic growth,
Mhm.
and that's hard to. It's hard to start a social media account. If like a bunch of people in the church were to go to that social media account and then share it around, it could gain traction. But then, what's the point at that point? Because they can just share around the Discord server. But and even still, like we run everything out of the Discord server. So if we have other social media accounts and they
Mhm.
only follow that, they wouldn't be able to actually participate.
And then be
Yeah.
headed by the leading like office holders at that point, and it could be a little um I don't want to say gerrymandered, but like where they outreach and how they outreach isn't doesn't reflect the entire church, I guess is what I'm trying to say by saying that. Um
Yeah.
and
That would be like who would manage the account? That would be another
mhm.
question we'd have to answer.
But I don't think it's a bad idea. I just think it needs more workshopping. And
Well,
Yeah.
one thing I do think we should do is, well, technically, everyone in the church has the ability to create a statue. they have to go to a counselor to then put it on the table. But I feel like if we put forward like a real system to do like public referendums for things rather than just always going through the council, I feel like that'd be a good compromise for the Big Biden Party people to let the people have more say in what goes on in the church, but not necessarily creating a whole new branch of the government for it.
Yeah, I mean that sounds like a great idea actually. Any counselors? Actually, is there one
Uh,
here, a counselor? Oh yeah,
I'd
we have
like
we
to
have two counselors here. Look at that.
Yeah.
I like the idea of the church expanding to other social medias, but I do think that we should have things be directed to the Discord only to make it easier logistically.
Mhm.
I think we could broadcast decisions through like Facebook and Instagram and Twitter maybe, but I don't think we should have like, and we can even have a Facebook group, but I
We
don't think
do have a Facebook, or we did.
I don't
I don't know if we
I
still
don't
have it.
I think church like events and the actual government of the church should still take place on
Mhm.
the Discord or
Yeah.
especially if it were to get more members, because that way there's an easy place that everyone can go and see what's going on.
Yeah.
And then once again, I also will remind all of you: tell your friends about us. Get them to join the server.
Yes, the more people, the better.
Yes.
Very true.
Also, for people listening in, if you're not registered to vote, this is a reminder: you need to register to vote if you want to vote in our upcoming elections. You can find that in the election committee announcements. It's one of the pinned messages, as well as if you're interested in running in the upcoming July general election. That form is also in the election committee announcements. I don't think I have anything else to say, Veda, unless you had something else planned, or was there something we missed on the itinerary?
No, I believe we talked about Joe Biden, divination, and some burning political topics like the People's Council. I think we hit all three marks on this first test run of the Joe Talks podcast. And if that is everything we have, I want to wish all of our listeners a good morning, night, evening, afternoon time of where you are. And get out there, get connected, and praise Biden.
Praise Biden.
Praise Biden.
See you guys later.
See you guys later.
Bye.